All right, so we're going to talk about force development here. So here are the three objectives or outcomes for this lecture. So the first question is, why is force development so important? So, we want to be like Uncle Rico and throw that football over the mountain. It's important to remember that not all tasks are equal, right? It requires much more force to throw a ball 50 yards as opposed to 5 yards. So when it comes to force production, this goes back to motor units. Individual motor units can generate different levels of force. And hopefully this isn't surprising. We kind of addressed this earlier. But I know some of you hopefully are thinking about, what about the all or none principle that says when a motor unit fires, it fires maximally? That's always true, but we can change but the max is different depending on the condition. All right, and so we can see what's going on, or we can kind of explain this through this figure here. Now, if we have an individual muscle contraction, just one, we call it a twitch. And so we can see that here with this first little bump on this figure. Okay. Now, if we stimulate a motor unit a second time before that motor unit or that muscle fiber is completely relaxed, notice we get greater force. Okay, we call this summation. All right. Now, if we do it often enough, we can generate max force. And so the frequency, we call this rate coding. So the frequency with which we are stimulating a motor unit is called rate coding. The greater the frequency, the greater the force production. Okay. Now, if we constantly stimulate a muscle, this can lead to tetanus. Okay, and this can happen a variety of ways. You can get, something called lockjaw, where you've basically experienced tetanus, or you can put a little bar electrode on one of your nerves, and you can cause tetanus in, like your thumb flexor. But that happens when you've got constant stimulation. In other words, the muscle's not able to relax. And we actually generate maximal force during tetanus. The problem, maybe, I guess, depending on how you look at it, is that we don't experience tetanus very often. Okay, I've experienced tetanus because I had a bar electrode on my radial nerve, and it caused my thumb to flex. Okay, and it's kind of nuts when that happens because you can feel it, and I wanted to have thumb extension, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't do it because there was so much force being generated by my thumb flexors. So this leads to recruitment as well. This comes back to the size principle. So motor units are recruited in order of size. Small motor units have a lower threshold, so it takes a bigger stimulus to recruit not only those small, but those large motor units, right? And so we can see that from this picture here. So if you look at it, we've got, there's probably about 10 or 15 little motor units here. Each of these little circles in here represents a motor unit within a muscle. And so depending on the stimulus will determine how many motor units are recruited. All right, so when we're below threshold, so basically we get below 2 or below, as long as we're below 3, we can have a stimulus, but no motor units are recruited. So there's no force produced because there's no cross bridges. Once we get above threshold, we're going to recruit some or even all of these motor units. And so we're producing force. And the more motor units that are recruited, the more force is produced. Okay. Once we reach maximal stimulus, and really what I mean by that is that once we reach the stimulus, or we reach threshold of the largest motor unit, so in this case 7, it doesn't matter if the stimulus gets even bigger because we've recruited all the motor units. And so you can see here that at 7, 8, 9, and 10, we're recruiting all of the motor units, so we're experiencing the same level of contraction. Okay, so we've got frequency, we've got intensity, and ultimately, this will lead force production. So how does recruitment affect force production? How does stimulus intensity and how does stimulus frequency also affect force production?